All right, that's enough housekeeping. I am super excited. As you guys know, we have been reading The Busybody all month long. I have to do the obligatory look at this cover. I've been obsessed with this cover since the art department showed it to me, and it just looks so good, especially in person if you haven't seen it in person. So, we have been reading and chatting about The Busybody, which of course means today we are going to be joined by Kemper Donovan, who I now get to say is a USA Today bestseller. That's right. The Busybody on the bestseller week for 3 weeks in a row. Like, come on, guys. That's awesome. I can't wait to get into it. So, I'm going to go ahead and bring Kemper up on screen so that he can introduce himself, talk about the book, and then we will start jumping into your questions. So, I see some comments already coming in. Keep them coming. We're going to get to as many as we can. So, help me welcome Kemper Donovan to our book club.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Kemper. Thank you so much for joining the Between the Chapters book club today. We are so happy to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Like I said, I would love to have you just introduce yourself, chat about who you are, what you work on, aka tell us about your awesome podcast, and then we will chat a little bit more about the busybody.
Okay, yeah, I see there are already questions coming in about the podcast and a bunch of
Yes.
podcast listeners who are tuning in, which is great. I was hoping that there would be. So as you all know, I wrote this mystery novel, The Busybody, but my love of mystery really started when I was a kid, as it did, I think, probably for many of you. But I didn't get really serious about mystery until about 7 years ago when I started co-hosting a podcast called All About Agatha, which is all about the one and only queen of crime, Dame Agatha Christie. And I did this with a friend of mine named Catherine Brobeck, very, very good friend of mine, who I had known for many years prior to starting the podcast. Catherine actually passed away at the end of 2021. So I now do the podcast solo
Mhm.
without her. So it's very much of a different sort of an endeavor, but I never would have tapped into my love of mystery and my passion for the genre without Catherine, because it was just something that we kind of, that I discovered about myself along with her. And I never would have gone along on that ride if we hadn't done it together. So the book is actually dedicated to Catherine for that reason. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it feels strange that, I was a mystery reader since I started reading books on my own, since I was, 7 or 8 years old. But it wasn't until I did the podcast and I realized that I was putting in tens of hours worth of work each week into rereading Agatha Christie novels. And then Catherine and I had a whole ranking project where we ranked all 66 of Agatha Christie's novels based on preset criteria. So that's 66 books that we had to put in rank order. Um,
That's intensive.
it's very intense. I was editing all the episodes, doing all this work, and I wasn't sick of it because I love
Mhm.
Agatha Christie that much and I love mystery. And we started branching out and talking to other mystery authors. And I just realized it's crazy that I haven't written a mystery novel. I had published one other book before I started the podcast, and it wasn't a mystery, even though it has suspense elements in it. And then I was
Mhm.
really struggling with what my second book would be. I worked on, it's very cliched to struggle with your sophomore novel. And I did that. I fell into that trap.
Of course.
um, but I really did, find my way through my love of mystery. And then once I started working on this mystery, it just kind of clicked.
Mhm.
And I don't ever want to pretend that writing it was easy, because writing is never easy, but it just felt like, okay, this is what I should be writing. I'm
Mhm.
enjoying this so much more than the other book I had been slogging through for literally years. And that is the book that became The Busybody.
I will say as a quick aside, I love that you kept the podcast going, and I am sorry for your loss. I know that that's very difficult to work through, but I love that you kept that podcast going and that you were able to dedicate the book to your friend because it keeps her alive in memory, and I think that's really awesome. So I did want to say that quickly before we dive too deep into things.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, I enjoy doing the podcast, and it's at this point we built up a community of
Mhm.
mystery lovers, and it obviously goes hand in hand now with what I'm doing with the Busybody and these books at Kensington. But it's really important to me to keep it going. And I get emails almost on a daily basis from people telling me how much Catherine means to them and how they love listening to her. And I forward those emails right along to her mother. And I know it means a lot. And she shares it with Catherine's whole family. So it means a lot to everyone.
I love that. That's so sweet. All right. I'm a big person who like talks about grief and the process and memories and remembering people, and I could shoot us down that path for the next
We
hour,
could
but
do that for the next 3 hours, probably.
yeah,
Yes.
so I don't want to do that to everyone. So that is my very not tactful way of jumping to some reader questions.
Yes.
But I do just want to acknowledge that part.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start you off. We're going to start off maybe easy. This may not be easy. But of course, we've got to know, and I'm going to make this caveat. Other than Agatha Christie, who is your favorite mystery author?
Oof. Well, I will parse that question a little bit. My favorite contemporary mystery author, so mystery author living now, is Tana French, I would
Mhm.
say. We actually had the honor of having Tana French on our podcast. We interviewed her, which was amazing to be able to do that. But I've read everything that she has written, and she has both a series that takes place within the Dublin Murder Squad, with a
Mhm.
really interesting way of linking them. And that's something that I tried to emulate with how I'm going to be linking, which we can talk about, how I'm going to be linking future books in this series. And she also has some standalone titles as well. And I would love to in the future write some standalone mysteries also like she does. So yeah, I would say Tana French. And then when it comes to other classic authors, probably my number two after Agatha Christie,
Mhm.
obviously, would be Josephine Tey.
Mm.
And she only wrote sort of a handful of books. She didn't write 66. I actually don't know the number off the top of my head. It was something like 6 or 8. She actually she passed away way too early in the 60s. But in particular, I love Miss Pym Disposes, which is a
Mhm.
very strange, unusual mystery. I mean, the murder doesn't even happen until like more than halfway through the book, but it's so atmospheric. And yeah, that's one of my favorites.
I will say all of our book club members know this. I'm a late bloomer when it comes to our mysteries. I, of course, always read the mysteries that we work on, especially for the book club, but I am not a traditional mystery reader, and I will say I actually only just recently got a ton of French book from the library, which I'm very
Ah,
excited to
okay.
start reading. So I'm glad you recommended her. Like I will
Good.
definitely move that up on my list.
You've got a lot of pleasure ahead of you.
I'm excited. You got me excited to give it a try. I won't say I was dreading it, but like again, it's just not my go-to, but
Right.
I'm gonna give it a chance.
Right, right.
Uh, all right, so I'm good. This was one of the very first questions that came in, so I'm gonna jump back on the comment section.
Sure.
In what ways did doing your podcast make writing your book a little more challenging?
That's a really good question because I
Mhm.
usually get the
The
inverse of that.
opposite. Yeah, that's why I was
Yeah.
like, I have to ask this. It's usually the other way around. So what was challenging about it?
Yeah, because obviously, people are like, "Oh, well, you must have used what you learned from Christie to,"
Right.
and I did, and I mean, it was very important to me, almost to give podcast listeners a little bit of a leg up in solving the mystery, and the Busybody is very much a puzzle mystery, in
Hmm.
the tradition of Agatha Christie puzzle mysteries, Agatha Christie whodunits. Not every book that she wrote was a whodunit. She actually
Hmm.
also wrote some thrillers that were more linear and don't really need to be solved. But my
Hmm.
favorite Christies are the solvable ones. So the Busybody is very much solvable with clues. And some of those clues are using the same tricks and tropes that Catherine and I teased out and just sort of highlighted over and over again on the podcast. We even built up some elaborate jokes about them. And those might have been some of the ones that I, chose over others for that very reason. So I think some
Hmm.
podcast listeners will chuckle as they're reading the book. So in that way, it made it easier, but very insightful question to ask. How did it make it harder? Because I think you don't when you're when you're a huge Agatha Christie stan
Right.
like I am, it's a little daunting to say, oh well, now I'm going to write a mystery in the vein of Agatha Christie, because what does that mean? And I think what
Right.
you don't want to fall into the trap of trying to imitate someone else's voice, because that's just
Hmm.
never a good thing to do as a writer. You need to find whatever your own voice is and where that line is between inspiration and imitation. And I think engaging in as much fandom as I did for as many years as I did on the podcast, I was always, and probably still am always, in danger of falling into the imitation zone as opposed to the inspiration zone. So I think about that a lot,
Right.
actually, where I'm like, well, I want to be doing things, as homages to Agatha Christie, but I never want
Hmm.
to feel like I'm trying to be Agatha Christie, especially
Right.
Christie, because she was such an unusual writer.
Hmm.
And she wrote in a really unconventional way, which is, I think, part of why she alone is as popular as she is. So I more wanted to take the inspirations as to structure, as to
Hmm.
puzzle structure, and then write a book that felt true to my own voice and my own preoccupations within a contemporary setting. And that too, I mean, I think one thing that people don't realize is how anchored to her own time Agatha Christie's novels were. They truly did change depending on the decade she was writing them. Like her books in the 20s feel like they're written in the 20s. Her books in the 60s feel like they're written in the 60s. I wanted to write a book that could only be written in the late 2010s slash early
Right.
2020s. And I think I did. It's
Hmm.
kind of tethered to this very specific moment, which we can talk about, politically, and also a
Hmm.
lot of what I think the characters are grappling with are issues that we grapple with in a more sort of public way, or in the way that the characters in this book do in our own day-to-day lives, and certainly not as they would have 50 years ago. So I used that as inspiration as well to try to
Hmm.
make this as contemporary as I possibly could. But all of those things are, trying to keep track of all of that is tricky.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is a lot to keep in your head at all times when working on crafting a mystery. It to me already is a daunting prospect.
Yes.
Trying to lay the clues out, give the red herrings, and then the big reveal. So that is already challenging enough. So keeping in mind everything that you just had to do the mental gymnastics for, it is
Yeah.
honestly quite amazing that you were able to pull it off.
Thanks.
Um, I do want to sidetrack just a little bit. There are some more reader questions, but one comment you made has me wondering, because like you said, Agatha Christie was very much a writer of her time. Her
Mhm.
voice and style would change with the times, but it is still very much a notable thing for how she wrote and still how we read her today. And you're right, The Busybody is also very much a product of its time. It is really only a story that can take place in this time in history, so to speak.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, what was that like for you to try to write? Because I know many writers, it can take a long time to get through the manuscript to actually get it to the book phase. So did
Mhm.
you ever, was that ever something that worried you about your process, or did you just know like this is the time period, this is what will work?
Well, I definitely, so the moment in time that I was inspired by
Mhm.
was the 2016 presidential election. So this
Right.
was and we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of politics, but I think regardless of your politics, it was a pretty tumultuous election. This is the Trump Hillary Clinton face off,
Mhm.
basically. And specifically, it was that period right after the election when people were wondering what Hillary Clinton was up to, because it was just such a weird moment. And there were all those selfies and pictures of her in the woods behind her house,
Right.
going on long contemplative walks in the woods. I
Yes.
remember just being like, this is bananas, both on a macro level as to the country, like kind of reckoning with, with what was for many people a surprising result. And like, just what does that mean? And where are
Mhm.
we? But then in a micro moment too, as to this specific character herself. And because I'm so, mystery addled, I of course
Mhm.
immediately thought, oh, this would be a good background
Right.
for a murder mystery. And that really occurred to me in the moment. So again, I mentioned that the podcast started 7 years ago. The podcast started in September of 2016. The election was like 2 months after that. So I noodled with the idea of a murder mystery for years before,
Mhm.
because it took me a couple of years to both realize how passionate I was about mysteries from the
Right.
podcast, and then to work up the courage to even write it. So,
Understandable.
yeah, I was worried about that. I mean, I remember thinking to myself, I had writers are always beating themselves up, and you live so much of your life inside your head. I remember trying to go to sleep one night and being like, oh, I should have done that Hillary Clinton in the woods idea thing. And I lost my shot, and it's
Right.
too late now, and I'm never going to be able to do it. Oh, well, it's over. And then I guess I just got over that, soon after that. And then I just started writing it. And
Mhm.
the writing process itself was relatively quick.
Mhm.
It was months, not years. and and then of course, there's you have to get your agent, and then you have to find your publisher, and it really, these time horizons are long. But I think I lucked out on finding the right thing, and so that my process ended up being relatively short, even though it's not like I'm a fast writer by any means. I'm really not. I wish I was faster than I was. But yeah, you just kind of have to have faith, and
Mhm.
not worry so much, I think, about the timing, because it's just so much out of your control.
Right. I will say, just a little behind the scenes glimpse. I remember when your editor brought this to the table and was like, we've got this book coming in. What do we think?" And as soon as he made the comment, it was inspired by Hillary Clinton taking selfies in the woods. I was like, I'm in. Let's go. Like, that's my favorite little note that we have ever received from an editor.
That's great.
Um, since we're on that topic, we do have a couple of readers who are curious, other than Hillary Clinton, were there some other political figures or figures in history that you drew from to create the character?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because yes, there are, and I would hate for anyone to think that my Dorothy Gibson character, so the detective, really the detective
Mhm.
protagonist of the novel, is just a thinly veiled version of Hillary Clinton. She's
Right.
not. There's a lot of, but of course, there's a lot of Hillary Clinton in her. I mean, one of my favorite things that I did, because it was sort of born of research. I would like watch a lot of YouTube clips of Hillary Clinton. She really does go like this when she's in conversation with people. Like that. She really does. And it's because she's listening really hard, and she kind of like nods her head like this.
See, now I'm
And
self-conscious because I'm realizing I do that and I'm like, oh no.
I think it's a good thing, because I think it sort of shows that you're kind of like immersed and you're listening and processing. It's sort of like a
Right.
processing thing. So I gave that verbal tick to Dorothy Gibson, for example. But so there is this phenomenon by which many women entered politics early in the 20th century, especially, called widow's mandate. And I talk about this a little bit in the book, because that's how I have Dorothy Gibson entering politics as well. And basically, that would be when a male politician died, his widow was called upon to finish out his term until a more suitable replacement could be found. And of course, back then, by suitable, they meant male.
Right.
But many of these women didn't go anywhere, and they embarked on very successful political careers of their own. So Margaret Chase Smith is a very famous example of this, and she was a Republican senator, first representative in the House of Representatives, and then senator from Maine. She actually served for decades. And Maine itself is a state that has a reputation for being very independent spirited, very bipartisan. It sort of likes to think of itself as the Switzerland of the United States. I don't know if it always is, but it's a really interesting state. And I put a lot of Margaret Chase Smith into my Dorothy Gibson character. Her middle name is Chase. And that was one of the reasons that I set the book in Maine as well. I also just thought the woods of Maine, again, the woods, would be just a really great setting for a murder mystery, around that time in winter with it snowing and that sense of isolation. So, yeah, and I put little bits and pieces of other female politicians who have sort of been in the news, or just the object of a lot of attention, often a lot of unfair attention and scrutiny. I sort
Mhm.
of did that on purpose, just to create this amalgamation of someone who has just been under the glare of media scrutiny for a long time, and like how she can sort of bring, I think, the skills that she's honed over those decades under the media glare, like how that would make her actually a really good amateur investigator. I kind of enjoyed creating that character.
I'm so sorry. I'm hoping my mic isn't picking up my dog whining in the background. He's playing with his toy and
I only heard one little bark and it sounded adorable, so
he,
I'm good to go.
he's being cute in a highly annoying way. But that was the perfect answer for my next question, which is now going to run out of my head if I don't think about what we were just talking about.
Margaret Chase Smith and
Yes. One of the readers is curious, did you always know that the senator was going to be the sleuth in this story, that, she was going to be the one to put the clues together and get to that ending?
I did. I mean, I definitely, when I conceived of this mystery, I always imagined the politician character as being the detective, as being the detective. I think that it's hard to remember exactly how it all came together, but I think I also really wanted to imitate the very traditional detective sidekick duo that you see in so
Mhm.
much classic fiction. I mean, that's what Agatha Christie herself did in The Mysterious Affair at Styles. It's very obvious in that book, especially, how much she herself was inspired by Sherlock Holmes. I mean, Holmes and Watson get referenced a lot in that book, and Captain Hastings in that book is just Watson. Like, he's very much a Watson-like narrator. So I knew I wanted that as well. I wanted a first-person narrator who would be telling the story and who would be the sidekick. And it made sense to me that the politician would be the detective. And so things kind of just grew from there in terms of, developing the ghostwriter sidekick character and who she is and what we know or don't know about her.
Again, it's like you're either reading the comments or you're reading my mind, because perfect segue once again.
I
Uh,
promise I'm not reading the comments. There are a lot of them too. I just
there,
saw the
I
number and I was
know,
like, oh, wow. Okay.
which please keep them coming. You guys
Yes, keep
are
them coming,
asking
please.
great questions, and I'm loving the
Makes me happy.
conversations. I did see the request to show the dog. I will share a picture later tonight in the comments section. All right, so on the topic of this sidekick, the ghostwriter, who I will be honest, when I started reading the book, I wasn't sure how I felt about this ghostwriter as a sidekick, as a narrator, as this individual who I don't know who they are. I like that was
Mhm.
very off-putting at the start, but I found that I absolutely loved that as I went through the book. And so I'm curious, did you always know that you were going to keep this ghostwriter's identity a mystery?
Mhm. I didn't really. So I always knew that she was a very enigmatic and withholding sort of a character, but it's not like I started out and said, I'm never going to name this person. I actually didn't. It's just that the name never came to me. And the idea of her telling a story and not wanting to even give her name felt very organic and real to me. Or I was like, oh, that actually kind of rings true for who this character is. And I admit I was also very much inspired by Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, which very famously or infamously, depending on how you feel about it, features a nameless first person female narrator. And Catherine and I actually covered Rebecca. We do a little side project Patreon for our podcast as well to help pay the bills. A little plug for my Patreon. And we once did an episode on Rebecca the text and then 4 different film adaptations of Rebecca, which was insane. But it's so interesting what Daphne du Maurier is doing with that first person narrator, because you both identify with her and you don't. And it's like you should be questioning her at moments. You should be identifying with her at others. And I think it's just you can do so much with a complicated first person narrator in that way with someone who is withholding, but not I didn't want to do a sort of unreliable first person narrator. I think in a more thrillery way, because that I feel like that's been done a lot, and I'm actually sure that can continue to be done in interesting ways. There could be interesting spins on that. That's not exactly what I was doing, so it was more in the Du Maurier mold. So yeah, that character evolved gradually. It wasn't that I set out to make her quite as mysterious as she ended up being. But can I also just say, I mean, that is the character who's going to travel into future books. This is at least a 3-book series. There will be 3 of these books.
Mhm.
I've actually already written the second book. In fact, I have it here. It's
Everyone is currently jealous, including me.
but so it's basically going to be a sidekick series, and this I did conceive of from the beginning because I
Mhm.
wanted to do a little bit of a spin on that traditional detective sidekick structure. So the ghostwriter is going to team up with different detectives in different settings in future books. And in that way, I feel like each book can feel fresh, but also connected to the the books that came before it. And I mentioned Tana French having an interesting way of connecting her books, and I was hers is very different, but I was
Mhm.
inspired to do some sort of a spin by what she did.
Um, Once again, you took the question right away from me. I was good. We had lots of questions about if there's a follow-up, if there's a sequel. So I was going to lead you into that, but you knew exactly where we were going. So yes, to answer all the readers' questions, there will be at least two more books, and you never know what happens after that. So just keep reading and buying the book.
Exactly.
Um,
Hopefully more.
Hopefully,
Fingers crossed.
hopefully more always. Yeah. So you guys get out there and tell all your friends to buy all the copies and
Yeah,
we can make
exactly.
it happen. That's the little secret that no one wants to talk about. Um, like I said, I could talk about the ghostwriter as a concept for ages. We may circle back around to that. I want to get to a few more of the reader questions though, so I don't want to
Sure.
derail us too much. Um, I think this is a great follow-up to that conversation. Do you have a favorite character from The Busybody?
Huh. That's a really good question. I don't. The
Mm,
honest answer is I don't. Because I think if you do it right, you have a like a special little relationship with every single character.
mhm,
Um, even, even minor characters, even like there's the character of Paul, who is like he's sort of the help character in a very modern way. And you would think that he was just a more minor character that you could sort of slot in there. And I think
mhm,
sometimes these characters in mysteries get a bad rap where, even PD James herself said that
mhm.
Christie's characters felt like cardboard, like she was just shuffling cards and
Right.
replacing one with the other. But she didn't. She didn't do that. And I think each of the characters has to make sense and feel real. And I feel like I spent a real amount of time, or a significant amount of time, with each of these characters. So I really do have affection for all of them. I mean, obviously the ghostwriter character, in that she's the one I'm investing the most in. I guess if I had to choose anyone, if this was a drowning situation and who you're going to save, well, since I'm moving on with her, I guess I'd have to save her. But yeah, no, I really I love all the characters in
I was gonna say I have a little twist on that question that I always love to ask authors, and it's a mean question because it's just like
it.
picking a favorite, and no one ever can. But I always love to know if you could spend 24 hours with any of your characters, who do you want to spend 24 hours with? What are you doing?
Oh, that's interesting. That's
It's a little
interesting.
bit more of a toughy one. So if you want to circle back around to it, we can.
I think I'm not going to really completely explain why, in case there are
Hmm.
people who haven't read the book. But the my Vivian Davis character, I think, is very interesting and I think she would pass the elevator test, right? Of like getting stuck in an elevator with her and
Hmm.
sort of getting inside her mind and her motivations and what makes her tick. I would be interested to sit a spell with her.
I love that. All right, I've got one more character-based question, and then just so readers know, I do see all the questions about the cover. I promise we're going to circle around to it in just a minute. But while we're on the topic of characters, I love this question. So one reader was curious, do you have the same dislike and discomfort of being around crowds and around lots of people as your character in your book? And as an extension of that, I'm always curious, are there aspects of your personality that you fed into any characters in your book?
Yeah, I mean, there are, this is it's such an annoying writer answer to say, like, oh,
I,
there are parts of me in every character.
I
They're all
know.
me. It's what was I think it's like Madame Bovary, c'est moi, right? Like that's
Hmm.
but but that's true. It's like it is kind of true. It's why authors say it, I think. But there is a lot of me in the
Hmm.
obviously in that my first person narrator, I'm only inside the head of one person, which is also,
Right.
by the way, very convenient for purposes of a
Yeah.
mystery. I think mysteries from the third person are very tricky to do
Hmm.
because you really have to choose perspective and choose it wisely,
Right.
and make sure that you're not tipping your hand by your choice
Right.
of perspective. But with first person, it's great because it's a done deal. Like that's it. It's just the
Yeah. It's
ghostwriter.
only that information.
Yeah, she's the only one whose head you're going to get inside. So
Hmm.
obviously, there's a lot more reflection and sort of internalizing of her character. So yes, there a lot of that I do relate to very much. I mean, a lot of her curmudgeonly misanthropic
Mhm.
ways, I let's just say, are not unfamiliar to me.
I guess maybe not. I don't know if this would be an easier take on the question, but again, it's something I always love to ask. Is there a personality trait or something about any of your characters that you wish you had more of, that you wrote it because you're like, I want to be like
Mm.
this?
Yes. So I do also talk about the writing process a bit, not too much,
Mhm.
because I was like, no one wants to read that much about the writing process of
Right.
mystery. But, it's like write what you know. So I was like, well, I've been struggling writing for a while, or, and now I'm writing this mystery. So I might as well, if I have a character, a first person narrator who's a writer, she could talk about writing a little bit. She is a much more, I think, diligent writer. Like she talks about her process and how she writes in the morning. And even the first time that we come upon her, she's sitting in a hotel bed, writing, with a laptop in
Mhm.
her, like literally in her lap. And I think I even referenced that it's like Edith Wharton, because as apparently Edith Wharton used to write in bed. And when she
Right.
was done, I don't think I include this, but when she was done with a page, Edith Wharton would throw it onto the floor for her maid to pick up. Because she was an upper class
She
lady.
was Edith Wharton.
She was Edith Wharton, exactly. Or she's like, I'm not picking that up. I'm here writing The Age of Innocence. I don't have
Right.
time for that. But so I think she's just a little more joyous about the
Mhm.
writing process. Like that's a lot of, I think, where she gets her joy. And there is a little bit of that in my life, but I made
Mhm.
a lot more of it for her. And that was
Right.
aspirational, I think.
I love that. I really thought you were gonna be like, I wish I could write in the morning because that would be my response. I wish I was cognizant enough when I first wake up to just be brilliant, and that's not the case.
Right. I mean, I do. Yeah, she goes on a little bit of a monologue about how she tends to write in the morning because she feels
Mhm.
like kind of clear and empty, like in
Right.
a good way. And that is true for me, actually. I mean, my thing is just if I have checked my email and gone online, of course, I can go back and do writing, but like I need a buffer. Like I need at least a half hour or something to sort of like decompress from that. So
Mhm.
it's much better if I can wake up and then just start writing and not
Mhm.
get my mind going on a million little things.
That, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I am very guilty of falling down a TikTok rabbit hole as soon as I wake up. I like to blame it on my job as being in social media, but it's just because TikTok is TikTok. So I wish I had more focus. All right, like I promised, readers, we're gonna talk about this cover because again, we just have to show it off because this is one of like the coolest mystery covers we have had in a while. So we always start, readers always want to know, did you have any input or say into the cover?
I did have some, but this is where I really want to shout out the amazing art department at
Mhm.
Kensington, because I think the only guidance I really gave was that I liked some recent mystery covers like Anthony Horowitz, who
Mhm.
tonally was also an inspiration for me. Honestly, Catherine and I interviewed him twice on the podcast because we were such big fans of his. He often has one object on his covers, and they're not very busy covers. They're sort of, you can like focus on one thing, and I think I said I like that.
Mhm.
And that was kind of it, though. And we talked about, because it was going to be called the busybody, having some sort of a depiction of a busybody
Mhm.
on it. And But then that is what I got back, and almost exactly as is. The
Mhm.
only note that I gave is that the Kemper and Donovan were like a little further apart than they are now, and I was like, can we just make them a little closer? That is literally the only thing that changed. So when my editor sent it to me, he was like, "We all love this. I hope you love it." I remember it's like the file doesn't load right away when you get those
Right.
emails, so you're like clicking on like, "Oh my god, I hope I like this. If I don't like this, it's going to be such a to do." And then I saw it and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing." And yeah,
Yeah.
it's just so arresting with the black and the blood and the pen with the writerly
Mhm.
thing and the typewriter font. I mean, almost in my excitement, just knocked over
I
my
was gonna say,
mic.
so excited, just throwing things now.
I didn't, yeah, no, I mean, I didn't think of any of that. So I really
Mhm.
just want to shout out Kensington's excellent art department for coming up with this cover. I think Kate also, I think her name is Kate. But anyway, it was, yeah, amazing.
Yes, I will echo that as someone who is on the back end of things. I usually see it like 2 days before an author sees the cover, or sometimes after. And I do remember this one. We have chatted before in the book club about how sometimes we'll get them and go, we're gonna have a fight on our hands. And this is one of the very rare ones. When it got sent, every single person who saw it was like, no, this is it. Do not touch this cover.
Do
Um,
not touch this cover. I think there are a lot
yeah.
of, and I'm not that I'm going to, criticize other
Mhm.
covers in particular. I'm really not thinking of one cover, but I think there are a lot of, there's such a push in the last like 10 years toward, like font heavy covers, just like where the
Right.
title and the author are just like, where it's like boom, boom, boom,
Hmm.
boom. And it's just like, and the font could be interesting. It's often very splashy, or you can do a lot in terms of tone with the font. But what I love about this cover is that it's very art driven. Like it's very much
Hmm.
about the images. And I don't think you see that. And with all that negative space, I don't
Hmm.
think you see that often. I think that's one of the reasons that it's as arresting as it is, because it doesn't feel like a lot of other covers that are out there. So I'm absolutely
Yeah.
thrilled with that cover.
I 100% agree. I also am a huge fan of like the negative space trick of the eye. It makes it look like there's more on the cover than there is, which I
Yeah,
personally like. It's just a cool design trick. So
yeah,
yes, our art department, particularly our art director Chris, she like crushed it.
yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
I did want to spend a moment talking about that.
no, absolutely. And I remember, I think I even tweeted something about this once I got the cover, but my only disappointment is that Agatha Christie often had so many issues with her covers, and she would write these really angry letters to her agent. And we have all of them because, these letters were saved, and some of them are so funny. And I was like,
Mhm.
I guess I can't write an angry letter, an angry email about my cover. I'm just super happy. Oh, well.
I guess for like book two, you can make it a joke and do like an angry letter about how happy you are. Like it's
Right,
so
right.
good that
Yeah.
I can't complain. Like why? You just gotta find the little reverse trick to it. I bet we could make something.
Yeah, yeah. Oh.
All right, so we're gonna go a little more broad now to some just some fun questions that have come in. Again, readers keep those questions coming in either about the book or about Kemper himself. We're gonna try to get through all of them. Um, we've had a couple of questions, about your writing process in terms of, do you like to listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts since you're on a podcast, or do you like silence when you write?
When I write, I almost always have silence, and I
Mhm.
think it's because I love music. I'm a big. I actually, can you see it? Yes, there it is. I play. So I took up the violin when I was only a couple of years ago, which is a crazy thing to do because the violin is so hard. But I also grew up playing piano and trombone, and I don't keep up with the trombone at all. If I tried to play the trombone now, it would be hideous. But and I love modern music. Like I'm
Mhm.
actually a big music person. So for that reason, I find it really distracting because I just start listening to the music. The one thing I do, and I will shout them out. There's this great daily um, uh, sort of suggestion called flow state. And
Mm.
other writers use this too, where they basically, it's like ambient music. So it never has any words, and they have a different sort of composer or instrumentalist that they feature each day. And sometimes I will listen to that while I'm writing, but even that I often find distracting. So I usually just have silence, and certainly never people talking or a podcast. It's funny, a lot of people tell me like, oh, I listen to you while I'm cleaning, like I'm doing all my housework or taking walks, and like that to me is the highest compliment, because that's when I listen to my podcasts as well, especially in the gym. I do a lot of podcast listening in the gym, and not because I don't care about them. It's because like that's kind of when you can listen really hard, when you're doing something that like gives you brain space to pay attention to what's
Mhm.
happening in your ears. But you still have like daily tasks that you need to accomplish. But writing, I really do need to focus on it.
I I'm not good with silence ever. I wish I was because I there are often times when I'm writing things that I'm like, I am just listening to music now and just singing along to this
Right.
song or having a conversation with this podcast I'm listening to by myself.
Right.
But I commend you for being able to do just silence because I
Yeah.
don't like to be in my own head. Um,
And it's
I,
ironic too because I actually can't I always have to have fans on in like any
mm,
room that I'm in my house
yeah.
because I can't handle silence like in my regular life.
Hmm.
And I even have to have a white noise machine to sleep.
Hmm.
I cannot sleep. It's really bad going to hotels. I have to put a white noise app on my phone to do it because I can't carry
Right.
the phone with me. But and I'm sorry for this. It's a slight tangent, but it's kind of funny. I have a 3-month-old nephew and I
Hmm.
just was visiting with him, and he had in his stroller, we went on a walk, and he had a white noise machine, and the white noise coming out of it was amazing. Where I
Oh
was
my
like, "What
God.
is this white noise?" I was like, "I feel like I'm in like a space station, like interlock or something." Like I felt like I was like in a sci-fi movie. And I
Yeah.
actually asked my sister-in-law, I made her send me the link for that white noise machine, which I now own, and which is now
Uh-huh.
my preferred white noise machine in my bedroom. So I have two white noise machines now, and I've been using that one nonstop because it's so amazing.
I'm gonna need you to send me the link for that white noise machine later, please. And thank
Okay.
you because I love white noise and I just
Yeah.
love noise in my ear.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious because I used to be such a music nerd. I played multiple instruments growing up. I always wanted to play violin, never got the chance. Still to this day, it makes me sad. But I'm curious, is there an instrument that you haven't learned to play that you would love to try someday?
The viola,
Mm,
because it's like 1/5 lower than the violin. And I actually think this is sacrilege to be saying this as someone who plays the violin, but I think it's more beautiful register than the
mhm,
violin. And then the cello and double bass get too low for me. I don't want to do that. I want to play something that I can sort of hold, but I actually really I think if I had known how those two instruments sounded, I probably would have started on the viola when I started the
mm,
violin. I just didn't know enough.
right.
So yeah, the viola.
Um, I love that. Like I said, I'm a music nerd, so anytime I hear someone talk about instruments, I'm like, let's talk about that.
What
Um,
about you? What instrument would you like to play?
I oh, would I like to play? Funnily enough, I actually would love to learn to play the cello. That was the one instrument
Mhm.
my mom wanted me to learn to play, and there was never. I'm not in a town that does orchestra type
I had
classes.
That's why I never started violin also. It was the same thing. It wasn't offered at my elementary school, so I had to play
Right.
the stupid trombone. And then I
I
like
which
spent my whole life being like,
I
"I wanna play the violin."
I commend you on. I could not I couldn't handle the trombone. It was too difficult for me. I was a
Yeah.
clarinet girl, much to
Okay.
my parents' hatred. They did not want that, but it was that or some other very annoying instrument that I don't remember anymore. And they were like, well, clarinet is the least of those two evils. So that's
Right.
where we went.
Right. Right.
But yeah, cello, one of these days, maybe I'll
One of these.
finally get a chance.
Absolutely.
All right, so I've had a couple of readers ask this, and I do love this question because I love snacking too. So, do you have a go-to snack when you're working?
Oh, a go-to snack. I don't snack when I'm writing. I really don't. I drink unreasonable amounts of coffee.
Hmm.
Like a ton of coffee. I mean, I switched to decaf at some point, or else I'd have heart palpitations. But like,
Right.
I probably have at least like 48 to 60 ounces of coffee a day.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness, when do you drink water?
I know. Well, yeah, I
Okay.
some of those should be water. It's true. But yeah, it's so I think I probably the snacking is basically just turned
Hmm.
into coffee drinking.
Right.
But yeah, I try, especially in the I'm a night snacker. I mean, I definitely, if
Mm.
it's late at night, I get the munchies like most people do, but I don't
Right.
snack during the day usually.
All right, I love that. I can only do like one iced mocha. I'm not a coffee person, but chocolate in the coffee, then I can drink it. So
Right. Oh yeah. I
I
mean, I'm not averse to all of those sugared coffee drinks either, but yeah.
it's really just I want a candy bar in a glass with ice is what it is. All right. I love that. That's very interesting. We usually don't have authors that are like, yeah, I don't snack when I work. So I kind of love that.
I know
Very
I kind
different.
of, as I'm saying it, I can't even believe that that's true because I'm like, is that really? But like, it's just in the morning and afternoon, which is when
Hmm.
I'm writing. I mean, I'm a big like breakfast eater and lunch eater
Hmm.
for sure. But like, yeah, I really don't like snack between those meals. Yeah.
Good for you. I
Yeah.
snack too much, so I might need to learn that that willpower there. Um, I think I've seen this question at least twice, so I'm gonna jump to this one. Did you do anything fun to celebrate your release day, or do you have traditions that you like to do when you release something big? I know this is only the second book so far in your career, but you do
Yeah.
these podcasts and everything else. So what does your like celebration look like?
Um, I've definitely speaking of like snacking and sort of eating fun food. Well, so I have two daughters,
Hmm.
7 and 2. And so
Oh.
this has been really fun because my first book actually came out like just before my
Hmm.
oldest daughter was born. So this is, she's really been able to be a part of this process.
Yeah.
She can't read the book yet. It's not, although it's funny,
Maybe a
she's been
little while
sneaking little
longer.
pages of it. Like she told me the other day because she's like an early reader and we encourage
Hmm.
reading in bed and sort of and she was like, Daddy, I read the first page of your book and I really liked it. And I was like, okay, just don't read more than that because it's not totally I mean, not that it's that bad, but a 7-year-old doesn't need to be reading this book.
Yeah, I mean, seven might a little young.
It's a little young. It's a little, and we had there are age appropriate mysteries that
Hmm.
we just went to the library recently and she actually picked up of her own volition. I promise I did not suggest this. A Nancy Drew. It was a Nancy
Oh,
Drew, like one of the
perfect.
graphic novel ones, because
Hmm.
the prose ones are still a bit, I think, a bit old for her, but the graphic novel was actually kind of perfect. And there's
Hmm.
so many other there's so many books now. It's great, like the easy reader kind of mysteries
Hmm.
for a budding mystery reader. But we've definitely had lots of desserts and ice
Hmm.
creams associated with the release of this book. That has happened a whole bunch. And I had a book event on the actual launch day that was in I live in Santa Monica, sort of in Los Angeles. It's like technically it's a different city, but it's all kind of Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And the bookstore was in Santa Monica, so I was able to have a lot of friends and family come for the event. And there was like a little ice cream shop next door, and we all just sort of were able to hang out. So like that was probably the nicest like day of celebration that I did.
That's so sweet. And I love that it's like a whole family affair. That's always one of my favorite things to hear about from our authors when when everyone is so supportive of
Yeah.
what you're doing, because it's not easy to be an author and to put a book out there. It's a very scary process. So I always commend everyone for that.
It really
I
is. It's disorienting because you're sort of like
Yeah.
sometimes you don't. It's like there's online stuff and then real world stuff, and
Hmm.
sometimes you don't know where to get all of the information, like the pertinent
Hmm.
information for like how the book is doing it. But again, let me just shout out because I do I this is the second time I'm doing it. Kensington it has been, and I'm not just saying this because you work at Kensington, Laura. But
So
Kensington
say
has
because I'm
been,
here.
yeah, an amazing partner for this. And like this
Hmm.
has just been the rollout of the book has just been, and not just because it was on the USA Today bestseller list, but like the rollout of the book has just been fantastic. And it feels like there have been so many opportunities for me to connect with people who are actually reading the book, like at all these book events that I've been
Hmm.
going to, and things like this. And it's been really nice having those connection points.
I was gonna say, again have to commend you because I know your publicist and campaign manager have had you at so many book events. So you are hitting the ground running, which is always awesome.
Yeah, shout out to
Uh,
Larissa. Larissa
yes,
is amazing.
yes,
Absolutely amazing.
Larissa is absolutely phenomenal. So
Yeah.
you guys have made a great team so far. Can't wait to see what the next books bring about. Well, since you mentioned the USA Today bestseller list, I just want to throw it out there again that you are a three consecutive week USA Today bestseller for The Busybody, which is incredible. So I'm curious, did you do anything to celebrate those announcements?
Those announcements. I think I ate more treats with my 7-year-old. Anything it's like for her, and for her, it's like that just makes her day. She's like, "Oh,
Right,
great, we get to like, have more ice cream.
right.
Fantastic." Um,
Keep doing this.
yeah, yeah. Well, and the first time I found out about it, I was actually traveling. I remember I
Hmm.
was in, I think, Scottsdale, because I went
Hmm.
and I'm in LA, and I went to Houston to this the wonderful bookstore, Murder by the Book in
Yeah.
Houston, which I knew about from the podcast actually, because they're so active in the mystery community. And then I went to Poison Pen bookstore in Scottsdale. So just like two fabulous
Hmm.
mystery bookstores, and I had just landed in Scottsdale when I found out about it. So then I was able to go to the Poison Pen and go out for drinks with their wonderful bookstore owner, who was telling me about when she, how she knew Sue Grafton and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
that was an amazing night. So that was a very appropriate celebration.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like the perfect way to celebrate that announcement and that
Yeah,
news.
yeah.
Um, all right, I want to squeeze in just a couple more questions because got a few minutes. So I'm gonna take you right up to that full hour, like I
Are we
warned.
almost at it? Oh my God. Yeah,
We are almost at
that's
an hour.
crazy.
It's crazy.
This is why my podcasts are 4 hours long. I mean, I could literally be doing this for another 3 hours after this, but
Look, if I thought my bosses would let me get away with commandeering the book club for multiple hours to run these chats, I would probably do it. But since you've talked about how involved and supportive your family is with celebrating these accomplishments and these achievements, we did have a reader wondering, do you ever let members of your family or close friends read your work as you're working on it, or before you send it off? Do you let them take a look at it first?
Yeah, so my husband is a writer as well, but he's not a novel writer. It's great because I think we both can understand what we're each
Hmm.
going through and support each other, but we're not doing the exact same thing, which is just like nice, because that can kind of get like boring after a while if we're talking about this exact same thing. So he is a TV writer, and I often read his material and he reads mine. So he is my first reader. He's always like the first one to read anything. But other than that, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't, a lot of writers have writing groups,
Hmm.
which I would love to do. I'm not down on writing groups at all. I just have never really found my own
Hmm.
writing group. So I don't have a writing group. And I have an agent, of course. So like for the second book, it's kind of a good example. My husband read it, then my agent read it, and then my editor, and
Hmm.
that's it. So yeah, I mean, I really do rely on him to give me some helpful feedback. And he's not a huge mystery fan, which is actually
Hmm.
great, because I think he's really smart though, so like
Right.
if he figures something out, it's almost, if he was too attuned to it,
Hmm.
then if he figures something out, I might be like, oh, well, maybe that's just because you live so much in this world, but he doesn't live in that world. So
Hmm.
if he figures it out, then I'm like, okay, I need to dial back. Cause that's always, mysteries are so hard because you're looking for feedback, both as to, does this work just on a storytelling level, as
Hmm.
any book would, but then also if it's a puzzle mystery, like, is the puzzle working?
Hmm.
Did you feel annoyed by the solution? Did you feel there weren't enough clues, enough support for you, or did you think it was too obvious, or did it seem off somehow? So it's like trying to gauge both of those issues, and he's very helpful to have for that.
I really love, again, how supportive your family is for that, but I also love that like he's not a mystery person. Like you said, like that outside perspective. I will say,
Yeah.
as a funny tangent anecdote, when I first started here at Kensington, my mom was a huge voracious reader. She wasn't always a mystery reader, so anytime I got a book to work on that they were like, "Oh, this is a massive plot twist," I would make her read it first because she had an uncanny knack for figuring out a book's twist or a movie's twist or a show twist 10% of the way in
Right.
without fail. So I
Right.
always knew if she didn't guess the ending, we had a real plot twist. If she could guess it, I had to rework what we were doing. So
Mhm.
I fully understand the like making the non-mystery oriented person take a look at something.
Yeah, yeah. I have one of my really good friends is sort of she's not a mystery person either, but
Mhm.
I'll just say this without spoiling anything. She figured out the solution to Murder on the Orient Express without like 20 pages in. She was like, I hope
Yeah.
it's not blank. And I
Yeah.
was like, are you kidding me? And but she read my book recently and she did not figure it out. So I took that as a huge compliment.
That's a massive compliment. Yeah, I that just it does remind me my not a book, but The Village by M. Night Shyamalan.
Huh?
We'll never forget sitting in that movie theater. I'm not kidding when I say 10 minutes into the film, my mom turned to me and went, "This is what's going to happen." And she was exactly right. Called the twist 100% and
Uh-huh.
have never forgotten that
Oh
moment.
my God, wait, just believe it or not, I have the exact same story, except it was as to the what was the first M. Night Shyamalan with Haley Joel Osment?
Oh, Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense. I saw that with my parents, and I forget
Mhm.
if it was my mom or my dad, but I think it was my dad, turned to me and said, I hope that this isn't, and then gave away the twist. And I was
Right.
like, I hope not too. And then it was like
Yeah,
10 minutes
it's
into the movie.
like maybe that's a hope that you can keep inside until it happens, and then you could be like, I knew it first. Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
all right. Again, I can take us on a tangent for this, but we have had a few questions come in that are all very similar. So I want to squeeze this in right
Yeah.
at the finish line here. A lot of people are really commending you on your great ability to write from the perspective of a woman, to really understand that voice and how the world is perceived through a woman's eyes. So they're just curious, how did you approach that type of concept? Because it is different.
Yeah, no, I mean, and honestly, that's one of my favorite compliments that I've
Mhm.
gotten on the book that I've heard a couple of times because that's something that every writer obviously struggles with and has to negotiate writing across difference, right? I mean, at some point, you're probably going to have to write something that you're not. And I just kind of embraced it from the get go because I knew that I wanted to write this story about this female politician and a female ghostwriter. And I can't even tell you, it never was a choice like, oh, I'm going to make her a woman. It was just sort
Mhm.
of that's who she was. And really, I'll just get very personal because the true answer is very personal. I'm gay.
Mhm.
And growing up, I was always the boy who was only friends with girls.
Mhm.
I'm pretty much still all my friends are girls. I have the joy of having a life. I now have two daughters. Like I have the joy of
Right.
having my life, other than my husband, which is a very significant caveat, of being surrounded by women. I have two
Right.
sisters, no brothers.
Mhm.
And I think that when I was younger, though, the female heavy nature of my life was something that I was a little ashamed of, and
Mhm.
that I knew other people would point to and be like, what's going on there before
Right.
I was comfortable with who I
Mhm.
was. And there's something about being able to embrace that and use that to create to create a mystery and hopefully to write in an authentic way that feels very empowering to me. And I always, though, I want to give another caveat, which is like, I know that that's not necessarily authentic to everyone. I'm sure there are some people who might read this and think, no, this doesn't ring true. And like you, but so I'm trying my best, and I'm not saying that I nailed it for everyone, but getting that response is so lovely because I hope that I am at least nailing it for some female readers out there. And yeah, I think it feels like a little bit of a full circle moment for me, given my experience. And yeah, it just makes me very happy.
Yeah, I will say it is a very tricky thing to pull off, to write from the perspective and voice of, you know, another someone you're not. But I have to agree with the readers who have asked the questions and who have made the comments. Like you really did a phenomenal job. It's often very easy to tell when a man is writing from the perspective of a woman, and I will say this one not as easy to tell when you're in that lens. So did a
Right.
great job with it.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, and it's something I think you have to approach with trepidation and also a lot of empathy and
Mhm.
respect, and make sure that if you're going to do that, if you're going to write across difference in whatever way, right? That's just one way. That you just
Mhm.
have to do it with a lot of care and respect.
Um, I could genuinely keep this conversation going for at least another hour, but I promised you I would only keep you captive for a single hour. So I'm going to end this on why don't you let readers know, like, do you have anything big coming up that they can come see you at? Where can they follow you to learn more about what's coming up, what you're doing? This is the perfect time to shout out anything you want to shout out, including your podcast.
Of course. Well, yes. So I'll start with my podcast. So the podcast again is called All About Agatha, and you can find that podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much anywhere else. Just put it into your little search engine. And I'm on Twitter at All About the Dame, and on Instagram at All About Agatha, and I'm on Facebook at Kemper Donovan Books. And I will be going on a second leg of a book tour in April, and that's going to be in New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts and Maine and Michigan, and I believe even Ohio as well. And we're not doing that now since obviously the winter weather would be a little bit forbidding, but in
Right.
April, I believe it starts in April 9th in New York. And all of those dates, I'll be updating it because we're still figuring out a couple of those dates, but most of them are set. All of those dates are up on my website, which is kemperdonovan.com. And there's a little news and events
Mhm.
tab there that you can click on. And it's just Kemper Donovan, nothing in the middle.com. Yeah. And I'm obviously, I would love to see as many people there as possible. And, we already talked about it, but the second book will also should be coming out around the same time next year. And I'm going to start working on the third one soon after, I think in a couple of weeks. So I'm just really excited to keep on bringing ghostwriter mysteries to readers for as long as they want them.
And readers, we will be sure to share Kemper's website in the book club so you can find that super easily. You can also keep an eye out on our Instagram. We will be sharing those tour dates and everything as they get closer. So just keep following all of us on social. We will make sure you get all the info. And I can't wait until we can start talking about book two. I am already eager to get my hands on the manuscript.
Excited
So
about it. It's all on a boat. I'll just give that as a little spoiler.
I
It's all on a boat.
I'm so excited. All right. Before I take us off on some tangent, I'm gonna let you go. So thank you so much to our book club, to the readers. Your questions were awesome. I'm gonna go back through the comments. If there were some that we missed that are just, we've got to get the questions, I will get with Kemper. We will get you the answers.
Yes,
So I'm gonna
please.
keep going through them. If you had a couple questions that you didn't have time to throw at us, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I'll check them tomorrow.
And I just want to
And
say thank you to everyone who also came and who had such amazing comments. And I mean, this has been one of my favorite events that I did because of that. Like all the back and forth has been absolutely lovely. And I'm so appreciative that you're giving up your time, like kind of in the middle of the day, depending on your time zone, to do this. It's amazing. Thank you.
yes, yes, thank you so much to our readers. And of course, thank you, Kemper, for spending some time with us. And I will let everyone go because, again, I could keep going forever. But thank you to everyone. And I hope you have a great evening, afternoon, whatever your time zone is. And we will chat again soon. Our next book club pick announcement is this Thursday. So keep an eye out on the group. You're really going to like the next one too. So have a great night, great
Bye,
afternoon,
everyone.
everyone.
My pleasure. Bye.